Good morning or good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you hail from. I see lots of people populating the screen right now. So we're going to give it just another 30 seconds or so. And we will start. Thank you everyone for joining. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's featured Encore Network program. I'm Christine Stadler, chair of the Encore Network. Before we get officially started with our fabulous presenter, I'm going to ask the attendees to use the chat function to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. Always nice to know who's with us on any one of these programs. We'll also, as the presentation begins, we'll use the chat to track audience questions and comments, and we'll address them at the end of Susan's presentation. So I see some people are doing that. That's terrific. Thank you. As many of you know, the Encore Network presents programs throughout the year, both through our monthly feature format and also through our affinity group offerings. We ask that if you've enjoyed access to these terrific programs, that you consider a donation in whatever amount you choose. You can easily find the donate button on our website, and I believe Kelly has also linked the donation link in the chat. So we would certainly appreciate that and end our year on a very highly positive note. So I'm thanking you in advance. I'd like to welcome this afternoon, Susan Wilner Golden. Susan is a leading expert on innovation and entrepreneurial opportunities created by 100-year lives and the new longevity economy, something we're hearing a lot about lately. She lectures on this subject at leading business schools, companies, and boards of organizations. She is the founding director of the DCIX Impact Initiatives program at the Stanford Distinguished Careers Institute. She also advises startups and companies on their longevity strategies. Susan has also served as a thought leader partner for Pivotal Ventures on their caregiving initiatives to support unpaid family caregivers. Her prior career in venture capital, public health, and life sciences has given her a multi-dimensional and multidisciplinary perspective on healthy longevity opportunities. She received a doctorate in science from the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, attended Harvard Business School, and was a 2016 Stanford DCI Fellow. Whew, with all of that, we extend a very hearty welcome to Susan Wilner Golden. Good morning, good afternoon.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And that lengthy mixture of things I'm doing, I put it there because I'm living a portfolio career. And I think many of us at this stage of life do that. So it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And altogether, it's incredibly rewarding and exciting, but very hard to introduce yourself in just one vertical. But I think that's going to become the norm, actually, and something we'll talk about as people transition to wanting to work longer as we live to 100 for many of us. So I just want to be sure everybody knows some basic facts going forward, just to level set, that babies born today, your grandchildren, perhaps your children, if they've been born since around 2000, well over half are going to live well into their 100s. We're hearing It could go to 125, a lot of different numbers being thrown out there, but that's an entirely different paradigm than when we all grew up. And if you're 65 and in good health without any serious medical conditions, you yourself have more than a 50% chance of living to your 90s. And all that means is it changes your equation about how you're going to live your life, how much you're going to need to live your life, and what you're going to want to do with it. And most remarkably, most businesses have overlooked this demographic as an opportunity to create products and services that will support healthy aging. And it's valued right now at $22 trillion worldwide, about 8.6 trillion in the United States. This is what's known as the longevity economy, and growing to by 2050 to over $28 trillion. So we're going to be talking about that longevity economy as an opportunity for all of you to not only just benefit from it, but to participate in it as what I call olderpreneurs, as you might want to start companies with others in this community or with younger generations, because you're going to know best what you need going forward. And I'm very excited to explore this with the Encore Network, because I think you have a unique platform to help create some of these innovations that will be needed going forward. So just some basic demographics. There's 10,000 people turning 65 every day. An extra 30 years of life has been added to lifespan just in the past century. And often you'll hear about this as the silver tsunami, the graying of America, the crisis, but it really can be better viewed as this enormous opportunity for ourselves, for our communities, and for our economy. So why this book? When I was at Stanford as a Distinguished Careers Institute Fellow, and something I'll be talking about more are these new fellowship programs that are emerging at a lot of universities to help people plan longer careers, that the concept being nobody should be retiring in their 50s and 60s if you have another 30, 40 years to go. But what I found is that companies and marketing, and I'm sure you've all experienced it, would lump all of us, and you could pick the age, over 60, over 65, into the same bucket as frail, elderly, and declining. And that didn't resonate for me, and it didn't resonate for the community of learners I was with in 2016 at Stanford, because we ranged in age from 50 to 80, and we were in the same classroom with people in their 20s and 30s, and we were actually in the same stage of life. We were coming back to the university to learn, to rethink what we wanted to do, what was our life purpose, what were our priorities, and to get excited about something new. Despite our age differences, we made incredible friendships. We learned from them. They learned from us. It was what you were alluding to earlier, that rich, reverse mentoring that goes on often in intergenerational communities. And I realized that these stereotypes and myths about older adults, really, we need to dispel, and we need to get the business community thinking about this far more creatively than they have. And this requires a mindset shift. So the book that got published last year by Harvard Business Review Press goes into a lot of the detail of what I'm going to be covering today, but as a reference point, all the information's in there, and of course, a lot more. So all of us grew up with the concept of a three-stage life. There were the learning years, and usually ending in your 20s and 30s. There were the earning years, and that everybody would retire somewhere between 55 and 65. And that made sense when average life expectancy was in your mid-60s. That's how Medicare got targeted to that age, Social Security benefits. But retiring and stopping learning and stopping earning, if you at 60 or 65, if you're going to be living into your 90s or beyond, particularly for our children and our grandchildren, just no longer makes sense. And so we need new frameworks to think about our lives and how companies should think about our lives. So now modern aging is being recast as a new vibrant opportunity, not just a problem to be solved. And it's the disruption of a centuries-old model of life, that three-stage life. And this has particularly impacted women, as we tend to live longer. We often have earned less because we take time out from our careers for caregiving, and we don't invest as well as most men. We save a lot, but we don't always invest. And there's a difference in terms of your ROI. And it's upon us, I think, to help live a life with dignity and meaning and purpose, and to help others do so as well going forward. So instead of a three-stage life, I came up with a concept that we need a multi-stage life framework. And I've made up some words, and I hope you'll bear with me, and hoping you're going to come up with some new vocabulary to capture what this new concept is for us going forward. I've come up with the concept. This is furtherhood. It's not elderhood. It's not we're elderly and senior for 40 years. That just doesn't make sense. But why not consider these extra 20, 30 years that we're going to have, that it's not old age and it's not retirement age, and it's not a period of impairment with aging bodies, although we'll have some limitations, of course, over time. But instead, it's redefining your own purpose through many further stages of life and evaluating how you can contribute your wisdom, your values, your experience to the next generations, and having a portfolio of opportunities. I doubt most of us want just one job, one role over the next 20, 30 years. And so if you think of furtherhood as a gift and something to look forward to, and it turns out people are in their happiest stage of life in their 20s and 30s and in their 60s and 70s going forward. So it's something to look forward to, not to dread. And I'm hopeful that people will embrace this concept by becoming what's known as sidepreneurs. You might start companies on the side. I'm very active in doing that. You might help create new products and services to support healthy longevity. You might be in a company or in an organization where you have the opportunity to hire older workers. You might be in an opportunity to create intergenerational teams, which have been known now to be the most productive. And you will also embrace staying healthy and engaged and purposeful and being an ambassador. I know to address ageism, I know that the Encore Network is active with the Changing the Narrative movement, which I think is very important. And if you're an investor, think of these opportunities as investing in dignity. Helping people age successfully with respect will be so important as we go further. So this is the concept that I have behind furtherhood. People who are active, enjoying life, and doing new things. And I often cite the person on the right side of the photo. His name is, he's a physician, and he was forced to retire from his hospital as an anesthesiologist when he was 67. Mandatory retirement, we all know that happens in a lot of professions. And he was thinking about what to do next. And he was thinking about where was he happiest? What were the things that brought him joy? And he remembered when he was in high school, he was a lifeguard. So at age 67, he decided to become a lifeguard again on the New Jersey shore, going through the training, buffing up. And that's furtherhood. That's not thinking about yourself as old and frail and declining. And these images are, to me, very positive images, different types and stages of aging. But these are the ones that we see all the time on commercials, constantly. And, these people are the same age as the prior group, but they're, they put us all in that bucket. And so I wanted to do something to help persuade people that there's just tremendous age diversity, and that if you're going to be creating new products and services, you have to think about the range of older adults out there, and don't lump them all as senior or elderly or frail going forward. So there was an article about this physician in the Wall Street Journal last summer, and I think it's a really great image of not that we all have to go become lifeguards, but that there's something that brought us joy at different stages of our life, or we're going to discover new things that bring us joy. And do not get stuck in this framework that you have to be a retiree. That just implies the end. It's over, rather than looking further going forward. So a concept I want you to keep in your own mind as you go forward is, if you knew you could remain healthy and that for another 10, 20, 30 more years, how would your plans change? Can't just all be sitting around waiting for that fall to happen or, limitation. So we need to start planning and having longevity strategies. And there have been some articles recently in the press to encourage people to think about working longer and to encourage employers to hire older. But there is no doubt ageism, there's bias, but we're seeing the greatest growth in the workforce is generally 55 and older. And of that group, 85 and older. Many people in their 80s and 90s want to work longer. They may not want to do the same thing. And the article that was in the Wall Street Journal this past February is about here comes the 60-year career. If you're going to live to 100 and you're going to start working, let's say in your 20s, and you might be working through your 80s or 90s, you're not going to want to work continuously. You're not going to want to do the same thing. But you're going to take career breaks. You're going to go back to school frequently. It could be at a university or a community college. It could be online. It's what you're doing today. You're doing lifelong learning today as you're embracing, new things and wanting to understand what's next. But this is happening, but society hasn't caught up to what's been happening, that people want to work longer. Companies are not being incentivized yet to hire older or to retain their older workforce. But that is on the policy wish list of many people. What if they were financially rewarded for doing so, in the same way that for some reason age is not considered part of diversity initiatives, but it certainly should be in companies as they go forward. So what I came up with, instead of the 3-stage life, let's look at a multi-stage life. And by no means is everybody going to go through all these stages, nor is this all the stages that we have yet to see in a 100-year life. And maybe you'll help me create new concepts. But somewhere in if we're in a 100+ year life, I came up with 5 quarters. And I know that's incorrect math, but because we don't know quite what's going to happen after the 5th quarter, which is the 100-year plus life, it could go to 125, it could go to 150. So we're going to be exploring what this new paradigm looks like. So think about somewhere between your 0 and 30, you're in your starting years, you're growing, you have your first launch, you're experimenting, you're learning. In your 2nd quarter could be somewhere between ages 25 to 50. You're in your growing. You're going to be a continuous learner. Your education in your 20s is not going to last. I mean, I went back to business school in my mid-30s after having done a doctorate in my 20s, and then went back again in my 60s to Stanford because I needed to upskill and retool. It had been a long time. But everybody's going to be a continuous learner, and being a continuous learner is one of the greatest indicators of longevity. It will help you age well. People call it not just lifelong learning, but long life learning. You're going to be wanting to develop financial security, and you need to start really in high school if you're going to plan for a 100-year life, understanding how much money you're going to need. You can't decide it at age 65. You're going to be parenting, but one that I want to really emphasize is being a caregiver. All of us will be caregivers multiple times in our life. It might be initially for children. It might be simultaneously for children and a parent or a partner. But this is something that's going to repeat over and over, and something we have to acknowledge as a true stage of life. But the one that I think is the greatest gift that we're all getting is somewhere between 55 and 85. I'm calling these the Renaissance years. It's not the retirement years, but it's a time for repurposing, relaunching new careers, resetting life priorities, reflecting on what you've done. You're going to be in transition mode, and you're going to need support in that. You're developing a portfolio. You might be a sidepreneur or an olderpreneur. You will definitely be a continuous learner in those years, and you might be a caregiver. And then at some point, we're all emerge into what I call the legacy stage, which can happen roughly somewhere between 75 and 100. But prior to that, everybody put us in that bucket where you have to do some planning for end of life and what you want your legacy to be. But you also might be a caregiver, or you might be receiving care, and you might be being a continuous learner. But what happens after 100? I don't think we quite know. We're hearing about super agers that live past 100 and profiles of people, of what's happening. But it's for us, all of us, to define what that 100-year life might look like, and to have the next generation with us help define what their 5-quarter life might look like. So again, this is made up math. You make up words, but we don't have these frameworks. What I can say with definity is the 3-stage concept, which is what we've all been raised on, just doesn't make sense any longer in a 100-year life. So these are the years, the stages that of the Renaissance years that I think are particularly valuable for us personally, but I also think for purposes of a business opportunity, thinking about all the new products and services you might want to help you relaunch, to learn, to transition to something new, to start a new caregiving company. So I just throw that out there as part of this framework. And why the stage and not age mindset helps is because there's enormous age diversity. We have this saying when I teach, we bring in older adults and we'll bring in 80-year-olds, and they're all in different stages of their life. But if you've seen one 80-year-old, you've seen one 80-year-old. Somebody might be running at the marathon, and which I know an 85-year-old who ran the New York City Marathon recently, and a 45-year-old did. Now, one ran it maybe faster than the other, but in my mind, they were at the same stage of life. And that's something new. And we're going to see this over and over, how much diversity there is in aging, and not to internalize it for ourselves, because that kind of self-belief will diminish your longevity, but most importantly, how companies and society views you. And if you're going to get into this business area, you have to think about your customers' stages, your workforce stages, and designing products for a multi-stage life course. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the OXO kitchen utensil products that are really easy to grasp. They were designed for by a gentleman who designed them for his wife who had rheumatoid arthritis, and they were very helpful to her. And for an older adult, they're fabulous. But 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds are the greatest consumer of those products as well. So it's a multi-generational product that happens to have stealth features that help somebody who has certain limitations from a grass standpoint. But he designed a product that is multi-generational and incredibly successful, just as an example. So if you're going to be marketing to older adults, which, I know all of you might be thinking about some new endeavors, you want to recognize that, not all 75 and 85-year-olds is the same, that the older population, despite being stereotyped that we don't use technology, we do. We're just not as fluent, perhaps, as your children or your grandchildren. And there are wonderful free technology learning platforms that are being offered through Google ARP, Older Adult Technology Services, to learn the latest technology. I'm in the process of just beginning to learn how to use ChatGPT. And every year there's going to be something new. And so we just may need to learn slightly differently, but that's okay. But we can learn. I mean, the entire country learned how to use Zoom. And basically, it seemed like in a week a few years ago. And the other concept I just want to leave you with, and intuitively this will make sense, design with and not for. 20 and 30-year-olds designing products for us without us being part of the team makes no sense. And it's an adage that is used a lot in design thinking, that you want to design with the population you're designing something for, but not hoping that they're going to like it when you present it to them. So it's a plea for intergenerational teams. It's a plea for intergenerational communities, which I know is part of your mission as well. And this is a report that came out from Boston Consulting Group saying that mature consumers, people between 50 to 70-year-olds, are happier. I mean, the research shows that, and they're confident. So that frames how you sell to people. You don't sell with fear, like, oh my God, you're 70 and you're going to fall down, therefore you need this product. But instead saying to appeal to their happiness quotient and to their positivity, and to say, by doing this, you're going to stay healthier, is very different than the scare tactic of, if you don't do this, you're going to fall down and die. Just, I'm giving you a very simple paradigm. But the research is there, and even companies now, like major consulting firms, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, are recognizing the important opportunity for every company to come up with a healthy aging and longevity strategy for their customers. And language matters. And so I think the words senior, elderly are really a disservice to us, and not to call us all old. The most acceptable terminology is older. You all use the word encore, which I think is a wonderful word, but we need vocabulary, and we need to correct people on vocabulary, and internally, not to internalize that we're old. I don't think of myself as old. I think, as one of my friends say, and I quote him in the book, he said, his body's 75, but he's 40. That's how he feels. He feels 40. He's doing all the things he did when he was 40, but his body happens to be 75. And that's a very different kind of mindset than the way a lot of people are marketed to. So we did an experiment at Stanford to try and crowdsource ideas for what should we be calling people at this stage of life. And we had older and younger. We had the DCI fellows and undergrads and grads. And this is just all the different words, that got thrown out there. And I'm sure you're familiar with many of them. But the one that seemed to like not offend anybody was older adult. And that is what is being used most frequently. But we're new at this. So you all may come up with a new word. As I said, I've come up with furtherhood and using the concept of the Renaissance years. And it's, we'll see what takes off in society. But it's interesting in other cultures and other languages, the word for old doesn't imply the end. It implies somebody with wisdom and who is revered and respected. So if we can come up with an English word that does that in a few letters, that would be wonderful. So you creatives out there, I hope you might contribute to it. But the Encore Network, I think, is a wonderful brand and concept and really captures that furtherhood of going forward. And I know you all work with changing the narrative, and I think they're doing amazing work. And what struck me about their work is that we all internalize it and we do it to ourselves. We'll say, you look good for your age. Or if you forget your keys, you say senior moment. Everybody forgets it. My 26-year-old daughter forgets her keys in her iPhone. It's not a senior moment. These things happen. And the research now is what's really extraordinary. Dr. Becca Levy out of Yale wrote a book about a year ago called Breaking the Age Code. And she has researched that if you internalize being old, you will be sicker and you will lose 7 years of longevity, 7 years of lifespan. That's extraordinary. So it's incumbent on us to treat ourselves with respect, correct people if they, like a physician once called me sweetie, like, no, I'm not. And, and you wouldn't do that to somebody who's 45-year-old. So there are moments where we can all be active. And I know you have affinity groups and age advocacy. I really respect the work of changing the narrative and Becca Levy as two prime examples of where we can all participate. So just from the economic standpoint, 53% of all consumer spending is by those 50 and older, and 47% of all wealth is owned by 50 and older. Yet most businesses ignore us and target the 18 to 34-year-old demographic because they think they have disposable income. But they're missing, most businesses are still missing this opportunity. So from a spending power, older adults have the money, and that's what's creating what's considered this longevity economy. But only a few smart businesses are really in the forefront of this. And I'll give you some examples, but we're hoping more and more will be going forward. So these are some of the traditional markets that I'm sure you're familiar with, but really important, gigantic ones. Home and housing. Most of us want to age in place and in our own homes, but our homes may need to be modified, and not just with grab bars, but at some point stairs will interfere. So when you are renovating earlier, let's say in your 20s or 30s, why not plan for older living where you may need some additional accommodations, not after the fact. But there's also new models of home and housing. Most people don't want to go to retirement communities. There's now the concept of having roommates. A lot of us have extra spare bedrooms. And there's new companies matching older with younger, because the younger often in cities can't afford to live. The rents are high, and yet they could provide companionship. They could provide tech support. They could do errands for older adults. So there's a lot of new types of housing opportunities that are coming to the forefront, including, a roommate matching service for older adults. Money and security, huge important area. Fintech solutions. I'll be talking a little bit about Merrill Lynch and how they've done an outstanding job thinking about their consumers and wealth management throughout their lifespan, and not just putting everybody, you're going to retire at a certain age. Health and longevity, a gigantic topic. Caregiving, $640 billion market opportunity. Giving and purpose, spirituality, identity, learning and connection, civic life. All of these are major markets to target. But most people, when they think of, the older consumer, they think of senior housing, fall prevention, and medication management. And that's it. And there are just gigantic areas. And then there are some non-obvious domains like travel. If with all that extra spending power, travel should be created to accommodate the wants and needs of older adults. Entertainment, we're just starting to see that. And dating. I'm sure some of you have heard about the Golden Bachelor, which has been very popular, and it's dating for older adults. But these other areas might not be obvious to most businesses, but might be to you, that we're all going to need a purpose, and there are business opportunities to help you redefine your purpose. There are business opportunities to prevent the isolation and loneliness that can often come from aging in place, especially if you've lost a partner or your family doesn't live nearby, and creating intergenerational engagement opportunities like Encore and CoGenerate is a major, massive market opportunity going forward. So just a picture of the Golden Bachelor. I think the final episode might be tomorrow night, if I'm not mistaken, or in a week. But according to the ratings, it's one of the more successful Bachelor. And whether it's ageist what they've done is something you could all discuss. But I think the concept that dating is a market opportunity has been demonstrated here. So who is the customer is a really important question, because the person who's the purchaser may not be the end user. You might be buying a product or service for someone, but it's like, if you're caregiving, you might hire a caregiver, you might have a tool, equipment in your house, all sorts of things. But the purchaser might be you, the daughter, or it might be the insurer, or it might be Medicare, or it might be Medicare Advantage or a health plan. The influencer who helps make that decision whether this product or service will be bought is also part of the equation. And the daughter is a very, and I put that there in quotes because it could be a son, but we're often in a role of making decisions for older adults going forward. And employers are now becoming very interested in this area, providing caregiving benefits to older adults and to younger adults. Independent health insurers are interestingly buying a lot of these products and services so you stay healthy. Government services like Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare providers, and state and local governments. So if you're in the business aspect of this and you get interested in it, just understand that there will be multiple customers that you need to consider. It's not just the end user going forward, which makes it a little bit of a challenge. I work with hundreds of young startup companies through a lot of the accelerators, and they have to really understand how to segment your market, how to identify where the opportunities are, but understand, how do you acquire these customers? There is no platform to find all the unpaid family caregivers in the United States. There's 53 million of us, 61% of which are women. There's no easy place to find all the products and services you need. There's just a screaming need for more platforms like that. And we don't have easy platforms for all these wonderful products and services that are being created. So I just put that out there, that despite this enormous market opportunity and enormous need, there are challenges right now in the longevity economy. And most older adults don't have the sufficient funds to age well. So while there might be wonderful products and services, they may not be able to afford it, especially if they're not working or their employer doesn't provide it as a benefit. So that is very real. And that goes back to the need for financial literacy and financial training early on to get ready for that 100-year life. And even if you are selling a product or service to employers or Medicare as a company, it's a very long sales cycle. And as I mentioned earlier, the end user is often not the payer. But we can learn from other countries how they've approached this and streamline much more of this in our states, in our cities, and ideally throughout the nation. So just briefly, I want to give you just a few examples of companies that have done some really interesting pivots to accommodate the older adult. You may all be familiar with Warby Parker. They're available online. They have stores, and they created incredible disruption to the eyewear industry by providing glasses at $95, which is quite inexpensive compared to what a lot of people were paying between $250 and $300, but they targeted the young hipster market. That's who they advertised to. That's whose glasses they design. And every one of my daughter's friends who needed glasses all ordered it through Warby Parker. But over time, they realized that there was this consumer out there who needed progressive lenses, and those cost a lot of money, $500 plus. And they could be part of their market opportunity. So they realized that they were going to have a vertical around progressives, marketing to older adults, but they weren't changing the frames. They were going to use the same hipster type of frames that their children or grandchildren might be wearing, not the ones with rhinestones and that were beige, but these. And now over a third of their revenue stems from progressives. And how they market, it's far less expensive than if you went to a retail optometry unit. And they market to multi-generational customers and their images going forward. So that's a good example of a company that started out in the 18 to 34-year-old bracket, recognized that they had a new opportunity, and accommodated in an interesting way the needs of the older adult in a very stealth way so that it doesn't scream old person wearing glasses here. And Merrill Lynch, I just wanted to point out, also uses a stage approach to what they're doing. Instead of just saying everybody needs to retire at a certain age and here's the money you have and that's what you're going to be able to do, early on, they've decided to reevaluate, because people are going to live 100-year lives. What are people's life priorities? Slightly different stages than what we talked about earlier, but they came up with these, that your life priority will change, but depending on what stage you're in, your priority might be family, it might be your finances, it might be your health, your home, your work, your leisure, or a combination, but you would have to prioritize. And they would adjust your wealth portfolio and according to what your life priorities are. What Merrill Lynch did, which was so unique, is they hired a financial gerontologist. There's actually a training program at USC in that field. And then that person not only designed this, but trained every single wealth manager to understand what the 100-year life course was like and what were going to be the financial implications of that, and how you help reassess somebody every year. What stage are they in? What are their life priorities? They've been phenomenally successful retaining and obtaining new clients. And I would actually say the financial services industry has done quite innovative work, recognizing that people need far more money to live to 100 and may not be ready to retire in their 50s and 60s going forward. And another company I just want to give you an example of is called Cake. It's an end-of-life care platform for people who might have serious illness, but also if you're in your 20s and 30s, just to have a plan. And if you've ever done any of the end-of-life care planning and estate planning, it's very complicated. And in one place, one-stop shop, you can go and get all your information about wills and estates, life insurance, power of attorney, what your legacy wants to be, and document that, your digital afterlife, funeral planning, on and on and on. This is such a complicated area. This is one of the few highly successful direct-to-consumer platforms. She has over 40 million visitors to her platform right now, which is enormous. And I put that out there to all of you because I think the Encore Network and what you're doing around your affinity groups could potentially create platforms, not for end of life, but for transition planning, for learning, for working longer. And there are, as I said, tons of companies out there, but they're not gathered. And her business model is, this is all free to you. All the information on this platform is free. But if you purchase, let's say, a power of attorney from a particular provider, a form, that provider pays the company as a lead generated fee. So there's no financial transaction to the company from you, but it's through these vendors that they've developed. So the model is there, the need is there, but we need some creative talent who want to help build these types of platforms. So I just want to leave you with a couple of other thoughts to consider as you consider programs and resources to integrate into what you're doing. Obviously, we have CoGenerate, as an example of where you can learn and continue to work. But there's also programs like the Stanford DCI. There's a program called Modern Elder Academy. I know Chip Conley is going to be speaking to your group. There's a program called What's Next, the Village Movement. But all of these are not in one place. They're on my slide, and this is just a handful of them. But wouldn't it be great if people who were thinking about what's next in their encore years had a one-stop platform? So I just wanted to throw that out there as an idea of what this particular wonderful group could be doing. This is my website, stagenotage.com, and HBR Press sells the book along with Amazon, but you would get more detail in the book about many more companies. I profile about 30 different kinds of companies, and some of them actually have flourished and some have not, because this is such a quickly changing field. I just wanted to introduce this topic to you, and happy to take questions from the chat and open it to discussion.
Thank you, Susan, so much. Our audience here has been very busy.
Okay.
Very busy during your presentation. So I'm going to try to highlight a couple of these while we still have you. Just FYI, Susan needs to leave just a few 5 minutes early or so. She has an engagement right after this. So we want to be mindful of that. So a couple of people have mentioned things that are kind of intertwined here. From Paul Adler, he points to Warby Parker, which is a company you've mentioned. I know it's in your book as well. He says they've trained their salespeople to help different generations, which is terrific. They probably have a lot of younger people. Maybe they have a multi-gen kind of sales force, employee force. So that's great. But then on the other hand, we have someone has pointed out in particular Medicare commercials. And I believe the person's comment was UGH, E-U-G-H exclam. So the question really becomes, there are great examples, but there does seem to be a gap. I know we've had Jeff Weiss, Age of Majority, very focused on consumerism with respect to older people. How realistically, Susan, do you think companies, groups producing goods and services, are they getting the message? So part A question. B, what else can we do individually or as a group like the Encore Network? What can we do to make sure that message hits even closer to home?
Yeah, it's a great question. We can't mandate it, obviously, but we can research it to the extent, say, companies that have multi-generational products like Warby Parker or Best Buy, and I'll give you them as another example, do better. I mean, they're leaving money on the table if they do that. Government agencies, that's like shame on them. But what we can do is advocacy. So there was in San Francisco, right before the pandemic, there was a campaign to end ageism. And they had billboards all over the city of pictures of older adults, and not just the super ages. I mean, people that looked older, but underneath they would say, this is creative. This person's an entrepreneur, defying the stereotype that everybody's a retiree or frail. They looked older, but they looked active. They looked like you would want to connect with them. And it was a really exciting campaign. And it ended during COVID a little bit, but there is a need for public service announcements about the value of older, the respect that's doing every article about like the physician who became a lifeguard. It helps. It defies a stereotype. But all of us can take it on in terms of language, correcting people if they call you sweetie or elderly or, retiree, because I bristle at that. I'm not there yet. Mentally, I'm not there as a consumer. I would not want to buy products and services that are intended for the elderly. So I think there's education. I think what you're doing in terms of advocacy is important. And then calling out the good examples, the positive messages, I think will go a long way rather than sort of like slapping people in the wrist, but just saying, look how well this is going because they portray older adults as vibrant and contributing.
Sure. Thank you. One of our attendees and actually very long time member and original founder of the Encore Network, Betsy Worley, made an interesting comment. Betsy mentions that the ASA, I believe, American Society on Aging, has advocated for every company, or for many companies, to have a chief gerontology officer or something along those lines. Throughout the research for your book and since the book has come out, Susan, do you see movement towards something along those lines?
I think what I'm hearing more and more about is a chief longevity officer, not gerontology, which kind of puts you in, again, in that bucket of geriatric, but more that everybody's going to have 100-year plus life. And how do you plan for it? How should a company plan for it in terms of their product strategy, but also from their employee standpoint? They're going to have a 5, possibly 6 generation workforce. So what does that mean? What does that look like? How do you take advantage of it rather than see it as, fighting over, promotions, kind of, so to speak? But if people begin to realize that every company needs a longevity strategy, every board will need one, and every individual will need one. So I think of the word longevity as a little bit better, in a more positive, more inclusive concept than just taking care of the older.
What about companies and real movement towards things like phased retirement or flex work options for an older worker who maybe doesn't want to pull back just because he or she is getting older and tired? They're not tired, they just want to explore other things. Right. We don't seem as a society, as a country, to have a lot of real opportunities there. Do you see shifts? More shifts occurring or will be occurring?
I'm definitely hearing that more in law firms where there used to be, push you out so you could bring the younger in and give them a partner track, accounting firms, consulting firms. I think there is movement in that way. And it is true, older might want a portfolio of things, and they don't cost more because often they don't need the healthcare benefits that traditionally were provided by a company. So there is movement. There most certainly is. It's not universal. I think we could benefit if there was some policy and financial incentives to do that.
Sure, certainly some room there. We have a question from, I believe it came from Doug Dixon, and of course I had it a second ago, so I'll paraphrase it if I can't find it. Doug is asking about cyclical stages. And here's his question: what is your view of cyclical stages of life rather than a sequential flow, as you outline in the 5 quarters model?
Well, and I agree with the cyclical in the sense that that's why I was trying to capture, that caregiving and continuous learning will be continuous throughout your life, but what I was trying to say is not everybody's going to go through all those stages, but it's far more than just 3 stages. And I keep coming up with new, Serena Williams recently retired from tennis. She said, "I'm not retiring, I'm evolving." And I thought that's a wonderful new stage. You're in your evolution stage. And that'll happen many times. So I think that the cyclical is probably the better drawing. I just couldn't figure out a way to lay it all out, that they were going to be doing this different stages multiple times in our lives, not just at one point.
Well, Susan, we're getting a couple of requests from some of our audience members. How can we contact Susan? We can tack on, is your email address okay?
Yeah, you can send them my email. Absolutely.
Okay, which is?
Susan@GoldenSF, like Sam Frank.
That's right. I'm going to post it right here.
Okay, feel free to reach out. I really think your organization has an enormous network, obviously, but an opportunity to create platforms and networks for many people to tap into these new stages, these new learning opportunities, these new working opportunities. There are companies that help match older workers with age-friendly working environments. And I think it would be great to have those all readily available to people, because this is brand new. Living this long is brand new, and we don't have the societal infrastructure to support it yet. So I think it's on the innovators out there in the business community who can help move it along.
Thank you. And Joanne kind of echoes that comment. We have a comment from Joanne Webb. Going from full-time to part-time working with an organization can provide a great opportunity for transitioning to that next phase. We have a question from actually one of our board members. Can you talk about whether any other countries are further ahead of us in this kind of thinking? I know we always tend to think the US leads the way, but maybe not so much.
We're aging slower than some other societies, so they are ahead. So Singapore is a model country, Japan, Germany, Denmark. In Denmark, as an example, they provide free digital literacy every year to anybody over 50, not just once, but every year, recognizing that things are changing. They are investing in their older adults. They have a strategic plan to help people work longer. So many countries, and I commend to you the Netflix series on the blue zones that recently came out. And one of the episodes profiles both Singapore and Aspen as blue zones. And they're doing remarkable things. So I think it'll be harder to see it happen everywhere in the United States, but I could see cities, there's healthy aging platforms for certain cities, for certain states. But you all can maybe be that link to many of them going forward.
As we get closer to wrapping up here, Susan, I want to know if maybe there's one thing or two or three specific things you think we can do in the private sector on a regional, a state-by-state basis, maybe, to move the needle forward as well. Who do we reach out to? Or is that a platform issue for the Encore Network, perhaps?
Well, I think a couple of cities have business councils on aging or on caregiving. I think if you could create certified age-friendly employers and where they are eager to hire older and spotlight that in your community, in your newspapers, on your platform, that would be just a tremendous start right there. Because people want to work longer and as part-time, full-time, but making it easy to find those opportunities instead of everybody digging in. And there is the Age Friendly Institute that's based out of Boston that does wonderful work. But I think that could be a whole initiative that would go a very long way to spotlight those who are doing it rather than punishing those who don't, because they'll come along at some point. I want to thank you for this opportunity. It was incredible. I'm very excited about what you all are going to be doing going forward.
And please feel free to reach out to Susan. As I said, we provided her contact information. And also, since we are, thank you so much, Susan. This has been really informative, interesting, and I think particularly thought-provoking for the Encore Network as we consider our slate of activities and programs for 2024 and beyond. So thank you again.
I look
so
forward
much.
to staying connected, and feel free. And I'm sorry I had to leave a few minutes early today, but thank you for this.
Yes, thanks so much, Susan.
Everybody.
Really great meeting you and seeing you. And to everyone, please feel free to get in touch with us. I think there are a number of jumping off points from what Susan just talked about. We may even do a bit of a survey. Kelly has just put up the poll. If you would all be so kind to take a minute and fill out the poll. And typically at this part of a program, we mention next month's program. We are off for the month of December. I believe January's program is going to feature some content on mentoring and mentorship and the whole concept of traditional mentoring, what's sometimes also called reverse mentoring, how the generations can work better and learn more from each other. And I know that Chip Conley is slated to present to us, I believe, February 22nd. It is on the website, so if I got the date wrong, I apologize, but it will be on the website. So please take a minute, fill out the poll, and if you've already done that, thank you. And send us comments about how you think we as Encore Network might be able to better support some of the issues that we talked about here today. Certainly a lot of food for thought. So thank you to everyone. Thanks for coming.